There we are. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Back to Basics. Today we'll be talking about mental health. My name is Brendan Blake. I'm the Director of Advocacy for AARP Arizona, and it's been a while since I've been the host of the show here. AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. With a nationwide presence, AARP strengthens communities and advocates for what matters most to the more than 100 million Americans 50 plus and their families, health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. AARP also provides the nation's largest circulation publications, the AARP Magazine and AARP Bulletin. To learn more, visit aarp.org/about AARP at www.aarp.org/espanol or follow at AARP, at AARP Espanol, and at AARP Advocates on social media. In the month of July, AARP offers events and enriching experiences close to home and from your home, close to home and from your home that help make connections and serve others. While our situations are different, our need for connection is universal. Now more than ever, we know that connecting with family and friends is vital to aging well and living longer, happier lives. Visit us at aarp.org/local. Thank you again, and I will turn it over to Coach SheriAnne because I think that really leads us right into our topic for today.
Well done. Well done. It's so nice to be here with you, Brendan. How are you doing? You doing well?
I'm doing all right. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about mental health awareness. It is one of those things that just does not get talked about. And there's a great, coined phrase of know your science so you can create no stigma. So it's KNOW, no science, so that you can help create no stigma. And as you're tuning in today, please let us know where you're tuning in from. I always love to see, where people are coming in from. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything to share about mental awareness, please pop it in there in the chat and in the comment section, and we'll be able to address it. And I always circle back around and answer any questions post the presentation as well. So please, participate. I always love that. But so what do we do to create no stigma? And that's really a challenging thing because a lot of people are talking more and more about mental illness, but it does not get talked about very much. And so let's first dive into what really is mental illness. How do we define mental illness? And it's a really hard one to define because it can fall into a couple of different categories, and it can be caused by a combination of things. But we're talking about things like anxiety, bipolar, and ADHD is even coined a mental illness, PTSD, if you have suicidal thoughts, if you're antisocial, if you're facing depression, eating disorders fall into that. And seasonal affect disorder, we don't really necessarily have that here because we have sunshine all the time. But people that live in climates where it's very cloudy, they can have seasonal, affect disorder. And that's where you're just really super sad when it's just cloudy outside because you're not getting that vitamin D from the sun and, getting that serotonin release in your body. Schizophrenia is another mental illness, and if I'm missing any, I'm sure I am. But it can be caused by several different things. It can be genetics, it could be environment. Like I said, if you're in a seasonal affect disorders environment, it could be if you're in a very depressive home, if you're facing, abuse, all kinds of things can cause mental illness, traumas, like I said, abuse, your lifestyle. And sometimes it's just a simple brain chemistry is out of whack. Sometimes that can just happen due to all kinds of things. So it's a complicated thing, and that's why a lot of people just don't talk about it.
Yeah, and there are a litany of books written by professional counselors that have done research on this kind of thing. Funny, my wife and I were just talking about this. She's got a book. It's related to positive psychology, and essentially they compare people who have depression, specifically depression, and they compare treatment options about is typical talk therapy, medications, and then implementing positive psychological attributes, like things like gratitude, and how those impact it. And so there's lots of things that can be causing mental illness, and there's also lots of lots of solutions as it relates to figuring out ways to cope and get better as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I see a comment here from Mark Goodwinson, saying my colleague recently passed through some mental illness due to his breakup. Took him more than months to get over it, and he even turned a drug addict after that. I'm sorry to hear of your loss. I really am. That is very, very unfortunate. And that does happen. Usually mental illness does drive people to addiction because they're trying to find something to help with it. And so, that's why we're here talking about mental awareness. And I believe Mental Awareness Month is, I think it's May. I can't, or it might be March. I'm not sure which month, but it's earlier in the year. But, it's interesting that we have a month for mental awareness when it should be something that is constantly ongoing. And especially since the pandemic, it's been, when the pandemic started, I said out loud to people, I said, this is going to cause a huge rise in mental awareness because people will be facing mental issues because of this, because of the isolation and the lack of connection with people. And so even pre-pandemic, and I should have looked this up because I don't know that there's any solid stats on it, but pre-pandemic, 1 in 5 live with a mental illness. 1 in 5 adults. I mean, 1 in 5 people, just the people in general. And then more than 18% include children. And I know that that's higher now because I even faced it in my household with the pandemic with my children. Like I had one that I was hanging on. Like I was like, come on, like we need to do what we need to do to help get you social and having that connection. Because I could just see him spiraling down out of depression because of the isolation.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you don't have to be an extrovert just to feel that either. Me as an introvert, if I can do okay around, not a bunch of people for a while, but there comes a time where I need social interaction, where I need to be around people as well. And, and I'm a real introvert too. So, it doesn't matter who you are. We all need connection. We all need the interaction with people. We need to have support systems around us, regardless of who you are. There need to be healthy behaviors that back that up, whether it be some kind of physical activity, eating healthy, socialization, things like that, just generally being part of a community. There's so many things that, that are around mental health that we should be aware of in order to keep ourselves healthy as possible.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, so what we're doing here today is talking about it because the more we talk about it, the closer we get to not necessarily conquering it because it's always going to be there, but knowing how to deal with it and not letting it, because like the gentleman that shared, I think the reason that he probably passed is because he was caught a little too late and wasn't talking about it, probably was embarrassed to talk about it because it usually is what happens is, people don't want to communicate that they're feeling depressed. And, so how do we reduce the stigma? How do we, I don't want to say normalize, but understand that there's more people going through it than we acknowledge. And it's having a healthy dialogue, letting people know that it's okay. Like you're going through a phase in your life. There's so much help that you can seek, to help pull you through that phase, but having a healthy dialogue, also knowing the facts that sometimes it's just a simple brain chemistry imbalance and you can get on meds under supervision to help rebalance that chemistry in your brain. The serotonin and dopamine levels just might be slightly out of whack. And so you need a little help to get those back into balance. You don't have to go on an antidepressant thinking that you're going to be on it for the rest of your life. In my early 20s, I got to a point where I was in a very depressive state and I had an eating disorder and I got down way skinny and my mom was freaking out. So we went in and I got put on an antidepressant and I was literally on it for 6 months just to help rebalance because I had gone through a traumatic event with an employer that was, I'm not long story short, it was a very inappropriate situation and I went through a traumatic event and my brain chemistry got out of whack, got onto an antidepressant, 6 months, everything balanced back out and I didn't have to be on it anymore. That's not the case for everyone. I do understand that. But just knowing the facts that it could be just something as simple as that, knowing the facts that if you just change your environment, or if you had a traumatic event, knowing how to work through that so that you don't create a mental illness for yourself. So just having the facts really, really helps. And being aware of your own personal attitude also can be huge help. And you can get help out there if you're having depressive thoughts and you're not having the ability to have a positive attitude or shift your perspective. There's so much help now. Like, I believe it's called Be Help, or oh, I can't think.
Online counseling services.
Yes,
it's BetterHelp.
BetterHelp, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can, if you don't want to go into an office, and there's online counseling services available, and really looking at your tribe, the people that you hold near and dear, and trusting them and communicating with them and letting them know, like, you need a little help getting a better positive spin on things and a different perspective, so it's okay to ask for help. I mean, if there's one thing I can impress upon everyone listening, is it's okay to ask for help. Everyone needs help at some point. So it's totally okay.
Yeah. And I think that if you've ever been entirely vulnerable with somebody, and thank you for doing that earlier, Coach, it's important to remember that being vulnerable takes a lot of strength. It's not a weakness to ask for help. You're being vulnerable, you're asking for help. And it's important to remember that, because, like we've talked about, there's a stigma here, and it's important for us to make sure that we're supporting each other in these endeavors. It's important, if you need help, or to check on the people around you, whether it's just a simple, hey, how you doing? You've seemed a little down recently, or something just as simple as that, a simple text message, something like that, just to know just to let somebody else know that you're thinking about them, or that they're thinking about you, as a way to reach out.
Yeah. Because the stigma, what happens is it deters people from seeking help. It really does, because they're feeling judged and they are perceived as weak. And if we can just crush those barriers, that would be so powerful. And part of that is choosing your words very, very carefully, and separating, the person from the illness. Like, when somebody says, I'm bipolar, it's like, no, you're not bipolar. You have bipolar. Or I'm depressed. It's like, no, you have depression. Like, it doesn't identify you. And it's really important to separate that and not have it be the identity. It's just something that is happening to you, because that does offer you the opportunity to be empowered and not feel shameful.
Yeah. Person first language.
Yes.
You're a person first, and you have something going on. So I am a person with ADHD. I'm
Yep.
not, I have ADHD. It's not who I am. So it's just, I totally agree. And it's something that makes my social work heart happy to talk about person first language. So.
Yes. Oh, 100%. And, and it's one of those things where it's so hard for people to not have it be an identification of them. It's just something that's happening to you.
Yeah.
And so, I'll circle back around to when I was saying, know the facts, get educated. A great resource that I have used is NAMI, and it's National Alliance of Mental Illness. And we'll have their website in our comment section so you can reference it. But it's NAMI.org. And they even have groups that you can go to. So if you are a person that is suffering from a mental illness, you can go to support groups. And if you are someone that lives with someone that has a mental illness, there are support groups for you to go to help, not accommodate and not perpetuate the situation, but also, be a good support person and also take care of yourself. And so NAMI is a great, great resource. It's been one that I actually go to some of the groups, because it just helps remind me of not being non-judgmental and being of support to people that might just need an extra voice that says, hey, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And I know that you have a resource too that you were going to share.
Yeah, so we've already got it in our comment section there. If you're not in crisis, there is a crisis hotline as well. But instead of a hotline, this is a warm line, and this is the one for Maricopa County that's in our comments, and there are warm lines across the country as well. So if you're not in Arizona, if you're not in Maricopa County, just know that there are warm lines that are out there. But this is just in case you have something going on that, it's not, you're not in crisis. However, you do need somebody to talk to. There is the warm line available, and we've got the link in there that will take you to the website that has the phone number that you can reach out to.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, because the thing that's also challenging about mental illness is it's an injury. It's an injury to our brain. But when we have a physical injury, it's really easy to address it and go to a doctor and have the physical injury addressed. But when we have one that we cannot see and it's not so black and white, we have a tendency to not address it, or think that it'll go away on its own, and so, but it is an injury to your brain. So if you can just also just shift your thought process about, no, I need to take care of this brain. This brain's got to last me the rest of my life. you know?
Yeah, and and something like depression or anxiety, they can be totally and holistically enveloping in your life. They're not something that, you can just. There are people who can't go to work because they're so anxious. They're sort of wrapped in it. There are people who are depressed that they can't get out of bed, and those things are just things that happen, and it's normal that those things happen. But it's important to know that there are resources out there, because we want to make sure that people are getting into a better headspace, that when you are depressed, when you do have anxiety, those can be some of your symptoms, but that shouldn't be the way that you normally operate. And
Mhm.
so it's important to make that distinction as well.
Yep. So I want to touch on just brain chemistry a little bit to help, because some people are like, what's dopamine? What's serotonin? What do these things mean? What do they do for us? Because that's where you can have that imbalance in the brain. So sometimes just understanding a little bit helps. So serotonin is your mood regulator in your brain, and it's your happiness, well-being. It promotes, calmness, and sometimes that can get out of whack for people. And one of the good things that you can do for your serotonin levels is get out into the sunlight and exercise. Exercise increases your serotonin. So that's the serotonin. So dopamine is also a feel good, and it's a pleasure. It's a motivation. It helps with memory and motor skills. So that's what dopamine is for. And dopamine, you also get that released when you exercise. You have a lot of dopamine released when you sleep well. And it also can happen when you're doing things that um, are sometimes not so good for you. Like, when you get a good hit when you're gambling, and so all of a sudden you're like dopamine released. If you're playing with drugs, you can get a huge dopamine rush. Or if you're a young person and you're really attached to your social media, and you're watching your likes like just flicker up and flicker up, and like that does a dopamine release. And so what happens when people expect that and they don't get it, like they have a dopamine crash. And so it's like, but that's where our dopamine comes into play. You can also have a dopamine release when you eat foods that are rich in L-tyrosine, that amino acid, which is like beef, um, pork, chicken, beans. So you can also get dopamine from foods, a dopamine release. So that's that one. So then we also have oxytocin. So oxytocin is like the love hormone. It's released when you have sex. It gives you the warm and fuzzies. It's released when you have connection with people, or if you're doing very enjoyment activities that bring a lot of enjoyment. Oxytocin also is released in your sleep. So there's also that one. So you have your serotonin, your dopamine, and your oxytocin. It's usually that blend. And then the third one is not necessarily in the brain, but it is. It's also your adrenaline. Your adrenals release that, and so that is your stay safe. And it's epinephrine. It's when you're in a situation where you've got to fight or flight. And so an adrenaline rush is something like you almost get into a car accident, and you like all of a sudden you like freak out, and so you're either fight or flight, and you'll feel like this surge of cortisol just like being released into your body from your adrenals. And so that's adrenaline, like that's the stay safe. And so people kind of, that's not really, I mean, that can people, I just throw that one in there too, because people always are like, well, what about adrenaline? But it's really the brain chemistry that we're dealing with when we're having mental illnesses is your serotonin, your dopamine, and your oxytocin.
Yeah, and depending on the kind of mental health issues that you're having, people with anxiety experience what's called in psychology is GAS, general adaptation syndrome. And essentially what happens is once you get to a point where you have so much cortisol in your bloodstream, you essentially become exhausted. And so if you have too much of it, and so people who have serious anxiety, they get into this final stage of gas where essentially their body is exhausted from being in that fight or flight situation all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
you might find that you're really irritable during those times when you have a lot of cortisol in your bloodstream. And so that's one of those hormones that gets released into your bloodstream that it's good for when you need it, when you need
Yeah.
to be in a safe place. But if it's always in your bloodstream, it's not good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. You need it if you're running from a bear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't need it if you're just trying to go to work, you
Yeah.
know?
No. No, we rarely need adrenaline. We need it when we need to get stuff done quickly. But yeah, it's a fight or flight. And if like you said, people that have anxiety, usually anxiety and depression go hand in hand because they're so exhausted from their adrenals just pumping so much adrenaline and epinephrine into their body that they then go into a depressive state just to like cope. And so that's usually where they have that swing. And then the bipolar is when people have like massive swings. And so um but yeah, having cortisol surging through your body on a consistent basis is not good for you. Your adrenals will give out eventually at some point, and it's not a good thing. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it can create a cycle where you get really anxious. You're really anxious for a long time, and then you gas out, and you're exhausted, and you find yourself in a depressive state, and then you've got to work your way out of that, and just to find yourself back in an anxious state. You
yeah.
know, so it's important that you implement things, have a network around you
Yes.
that can help you when you're in either one of those to keep you stable, to keep you level.
Yep. So let's, within our last few minutes, like, and if you're just joining us, please feel free to share anything that you would like to share with us or any questions or concerns. But, what are some things that, people can do to when they feel like they are facing a mental illness situation or they have a loved one that's facing a mental illness issue? And there's a gamut of things that you can do, and if you're wanting to try to do it on your own or with your loved one, journaling and having open, authentic conversation really, really helps to reduce the judgment, reduce, the stigma, and really talking through it. And sometimes it requires going to someone or seeking outside counsel to help, but I would really encourage people to really focus on their tribe. Your tribe is your tight six. It can be family, it can be non-family members, but it's, I say six because it's usually about a tribe of six that's really tight, that kind of helps hold and lift you up. And you got to really rely on that tribe for connection, because that's part of mental health. Having good mental health is having connections. And they say, like, even as people age, that is the number one thing that helps stave off, anything like Alzheimer's and, mental diseases. So it's important to have that connection. And even if it's your one partner, your spouse, you know, really lean into that. And, journaling is really, really, really wonderful. And, I do my reset at nighttime. Like before I go to bed, I journal, I kind of get everything quiet, and I just put all my thoughts down, that happened during the day, that good, bad, ugly. And then I write down my intentions for the next day. And then when I wake up the next morning, I reread those intentions, and it sets the tone for the day. And it really helps to like release what I need to at night so that I can sleep well, because sleep is so imperative for health also. So it's just, you have to find a practice that works for you. And mine is just getting it out so I don't keep it in my head. Because if I kept all the stuff in my head that goes on during the day, I'm pretty sure I would have an issue.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But it's definitely just finding the practice that works for you, and really leaning into that tribe of yours, that, making sure that you're staying connected and not isolating. That's one of the biggest things that happens with people that are facing, some sort of mental illness, is they really isolate. And that's one of the worst things that you can do, is lean into that tribe, seek some help. And if you're watching someone that's, in your life that's struggling, be that Be that catalyst, be that hand that reaches out and touches them and makes a difference in their life.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. When people have reached out to me, maybe in the moment, if I'm not in a great place, it's not, I don't respond or something like that. But it's still knowing that somebody's there. That if I was ready to talk to somebody, that's helpful.
Yep. Yep. And so the last thing I do want to share is a little thing that I have for myself and my tribe that we do. And it's an acronym and it's called PIPES. And so the first P is psychological. The I is intellect. The next P is physiological or physical. Then emotional and spirit. So those are 5 words. And so your being is like those 5 words, like what you're doing, what your intentions are for your life, what your objections, your what you're trying to, get done. And each of those is like 20%. And so I sit there and I'll evaluate the psychology of what's going on. And the psychological to me is the intellect and the emotion making a outward display. So that's the psychological of how I approach things. Then the intellect is just the brain, the things that I have learned and gained, the information and knowledge. The physiological is my physical being, like how do I feel physically. And that's why I stay so active, is because I know that I want a healthy vessel to be able to do the things that I want to do. And the emotional state of what I'm in, and that entails like the stress of life, the stress of parenting, the stress of career, and the emotional state that I'm in and how I'm going about it. And then it's wrapped all up with a pretty bow with the S, which is spirit. And my spirit is about how it is also like the psychological, the outward display of how I feel. The spirit also entails like my tribe, and it's the aura that I give off and what I want to give back to my community and the people that I'm around. So I check those 5 things, in my pipes. I make sure that my pipes are, and it's kind of funny to me because I'm like, I got my pipes and then I got my pipes in my body. Like, but it's like, it's just one of those things that makes me happy to address my pipes and where I'm at. And so once again, it's the psychological, the intellect, my brain, the physiological, the physical component, my emotions, and my spirit.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you do check in on yourself. I think that's a great acronym because I mean, like, if I've had a tough week or a long week, you feel like you need to re-energize, you feel like you need something, and it's important to evaluate what you need in order to address those various aspects of yourself. I know that binge watching a TV show on the weekends is not necessarily the best way to re-energize myself or to even take the time to evaluate myself. So it's like finding out what re-energizes or what helps you fill up and make sure that your pipes are all clean. What are those things that make you do that, and evaluating those things is important.
Yeah. Yep. So once again, because we're here at the end of the show, please, if you're seeking help, please, even if you want to private message me, please do. I would be more than happy to walk with you and figure out what we need to do to get you help. And so, because it's one of those things, and please keep talking about mental health. It's one of those things that we just have to keep talking about because it happens, and it's the only way of dealing with it is just talking about it. So.
Yeah, and thank you, Coach SheriAnne, for talking about this topic. This is, as somebody who, my bachelor's degree is in psychology, talking about mental health and mental health awareness. It's really hard fighting against the stigma that we have. And it's just, especially, I think that we do this as a country. We have a problem with this, but, men and women struggle with this. There's a lot of, toxic masculinity as well to talking about mental health. So talk with your guy friends about it. It's okay. I talk to mine about it because I think it's important. And
Right.
Maybe I wear them down sometimes talking about it, but it's important to just talk about it with your people, talk about it with your tribe, and make sure that you all are okay.
Yep. Awesome.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you. And please do leave comments in our comment section after the fact if you have any questions. And like Coach said, we'll try to help you out as much as we possibly can. Be sure to use the resources that are in the comments as well. And thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.